Hello and welcome to Storehouse 7 Ministries with me, your host Chris Wickland, carrying on through the book of Revelation, chapter 5, and today we're going to look from verses 4 onwards. So I'm going to read verses 4 to 5 here. So I wept much because no one was worthy enough to open and read the scroll or to look at it. But one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals." Now, verse 4 is an interesting verse. The Apostle John is emotionally caught up in the vision to such a high degree that he weeps in sadness and desperation to know what is written upon the scroll. He understands that it is something very sacred, very precious and important. He is broken-hearted that he may not be able to hear the mysteries it contains. In fact, the fact that the Father held it in his right hand, the fact the seal was so sacred, the fact of the scroll being sealed by 7 unbreakable seals, reveals the magnitudinal importance of what it contains. Yet here we stand today, 2,000 years or so later, and many of us are indifferent to this important revealing of God's plans and redemptive purposes in our future history. Yes, I appreciate the book of Revelation is confusing. Yes, it is difficult to understand. Yes, it can be frightening. But we must remember that the writing down of this scroll for us in our own tongue is of such importance. If it were not so, then God would not have revealed it to John. Even as I do this commentary, I too have to ask myself, do I really value and appreciate the value of this book? Verse 5. One of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals." As I indicated in chapter 4 of Revelation, the elders could likely be the 12 patriarchs of the Old Covenant and the 12 apostles of the New Covenant. But a conjecture to this view is that John doesn't seem to recognize who any of these elders are and the elder that's speaking to him. Yet when Moses and Elijah appeared with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration, everyone knew who it was, even though they had no idea of who they were, for they'd never met them. And you can look at that in Mark chapter 9, verses 1 to 8. Also, John would have to be in the same space and time as his future self, i.e., if he's one of the 24 elders, surely he would recognize himself amongst them. It is often assumed that this vision is in the future, but if it is in the present, then that may invalidate the theory that the 24 elders being the 12 patriarchs and the 12 apostles. However, we know that the New Jerusalem has its foundations and 12 entrances with the names of the 12 patriarchs and the 12 apostles already written upon them. Were those names inscribed upon it before the beginning of time or added at a later time? We do not know, but I likely think that it was before time. So with all of this in mind, we cannot be sure for certain if the 24 elders are angelic or martyred church leaders or the 12 patriarchs and 12 apostles or something completely different. We can only surmise at best, and therefore one should be wary at making too hard and fast a theology on who and what the 24 elders are. Revelation 5 verse 5. But one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has prevailed to open the scroll and to loose its 7 seals." It needs to be noted in this passage that the Jewishness of Jesus is an immortal fact. Terms such as the Lion of the tribe of Judah and the Root of David are not just mere prophetic fulfillments, but also they point to Jesus' human lineage, which is now immortalized. Jesus is forever the Lion of the tribe of Judah. This means Jesus is forever a Jew. He is not a Gentile. He is not something else in his glorified body. He is and retains his Jewishness, as he retains the marks and the scars that were placed on him on the earth, as he still holds the titles that have been the ancient Jewish titles ascribed to the King of David. So Jesus is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He is the immortal king of the line of Jewish kings of the line of David. And thus his natural earthly ancestry is now proclaimed as his heavenly identity. This would also mean, if this is true, that Mary is now Jesus' mother forever. Why? Because she too is of the line of David, and his whole true genealogy comes from his natural birth mother as well as from his adopted father Joseph. The title Lion of the tribe of Judah is an ancient biblical prophecy that comes from the patriarch Joseph as he prays the blessing over his 12 sons. And we can see this in Genesis chapter 49, verses 9 to 10. Judah is a lion's cub. From being a shoot, my son, you have grown up. He bows down and slept as a lion and a cub, and who shall rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from his loins, until Shiloh comes, and he shall be the expectation of the nations. The prophecy regarding the root of David is mentioned several times in the Old Testament, and the root of David is often also known as the root of Jesse, who was the father of King David. Isaiah 11 verses 1 to 2, and there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and the fear of the Lord. Isaiah 11:10, it shall come to pass in that day that there shall be a root of Jesse, who shall arise to rule the nations. The Gentiles shall hope in him, and his resting place shall be honourable. Zechariah 3 verse 8, hear now, O Joshua the high priest, thou and thy fellows sit before thee, for they are men wondered at, for behold, I will bring forth my servant the branch. Zechariah 6:12, and speak unto him, saying, thus speaks the Lord of hosts, saying, behold the man whose name is the branch, and he shall grow up out of his place, and he shall build the temple of the Lord. The eternal nature of the rule of David is found in 2 Samuel chapter 7 verses 1 to 29. We haven't got time to go into all of them, but I'll just pick out a verse here or there. Verse 16 states, your house and your kingdom will endure forever. Before me your throne will be established forever. And that's talking about the eternal nature of the rule of David. So all these prophecies and many others ascribing titles such as the root of Jesse, the root of David, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the eternal king and his reign, all find their fulfillment in the Jewish King Jesus the Christ, the Messiah, who is now glorified in heaven as the eternal God-man, who is from Jewish descent and is the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. That's Jewish biblical prophecy. It is these titles which the elders in Revelation chapter 5 verse 5 are ascribing to Jesus. Now, anyone who denies the eternality of Jesus' Jewishness sadly does not understand the incarnation, Old Testament prophecy, New Testament doctrine, or what the book of Revelation teaches. And it's important that we get these things right. Revelation 5 verse 6, and I looked, and behold, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 living creatures, and in the midst of the elders stood a lamb, as though it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. In Revelation chapter 5 verse 1, we have one seated upon the throne. This is God the Father. But in the midst of the 24 elders and 4 living creatures, we have the Lamb, Jesus. Now, there are very few verses in the Bible where we can see the Father and the Son side by side with such clarity. We only see this clearly in another book of the Bible, which is in Daniel chapter 7, verses 9 to 10. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from behind him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. And here we get a picture of the Ancient of Days, who is God, the Father. But in Daniel 7 verses 13 to 14, we now see God the Son. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days. And they brought him near before him, and there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. That's from the King James Version. So Daniel 7 and Revelation chapter 5 enables us to see the Father and the Son with a little more clarity. We can see that although they are one in essence, i.e. they are God, we can also see two distinct and separate personalities. Jesus in Revelation 5:6 is also the Lamb who was slain. He is the sacrificial offering to his Father to be the Passover lamb that takes away the sins of the world. John chapter 1 verse 29. The next day John saw Jesus coming toward him and said, "Look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." Jesus is the high priest who presents the offering of himself before God the Father, for only the high priest can present the Passover lamb on behalf of the nation and the nations. Hebrews 6:20, where Jesus has entered. I'll just clarify what I mean by nations. As a high priest, he could only come, obviously, before God once a year on behalf of the nation of Israel. But I'm now also talking about Jesus being the high priest, and he comes and presents his own offering before the nations. Hebrews 6:20, where Jesus has entered as a forerunner for us, having become a high priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Hebrews 9:14, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, cleanse your conscience from dead works. Hebrews 4:14, therefore since we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold fast our confession. Hebrews 9:24, for Christ did not enter a holy place made with hands, a mere copy of the true one, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God for us. Another thing we need to understand about Jesus being the Lamb who was slain is that he is eternally so. Revelation 13 verse 8, all inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all those whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from before the creation of the world. Now there's something remarkable and truly beyond our fathoming here. Jesus is the Lamb that was slain before the foundations of the earth was even laid. Jesus in the Old Testament always appeared in human form, which is a pre-incarnate revelation of himself. What does pre-incarnate mean? It basically means before he came in the flesh. It is as though Jesus was always in human form, because he was always destined to take on human form in Earth's history. It is as though Jesus was always the Lamb to be slain, because he was always going to be the Lamb which was going to take away the sins of the world. Theologians have pondered on this paradoxical mystery for a long time. Now, according to Genesis 1:26, God said, "Let us make mankind in our image and our likeness." Yet all the while, Jesus was also in our likeness, for he was also to become human, as we who believe in Christ also then take on his sacred nature as well. What do I mean by that? I mean, Jesus was appearing a lot in the Old Testament in his pre-incarnate form. He was appearing in human form. So what do I mean by this? I mean that Jesus appeared a lot in the Old Testament in human form. We see from the book of Daniel that he's forever in the image of like one as the Son of Man. So that then leaves us to possibly conjecture that Jesus has always had this form because of what he was going to become. This means the earth and all its inhabitants are not a thought of fancy which God decided to make just because he had nothing better to do. No, rather the earth, its people, the angelic and demonic war, the plan of redemption are all part of God's eternal plan, which we simply cannot grasp as to its depth, meaning and complexity. The earth, although transitory, is wrapped into the eternal nature, plans, and will of God himself. For Jesus to always be the lamb that was slain and always to have human form means he was eternally destined to walk this earth and die for its inhabitants. Now, if that doesn't blow your mind, then quite frankly, I don't know what will. God bless you. See you again soon. Bye-bye.